Danny, please mute yourself. Okay, how are you? That's great. My master's about to do a show if she's doing
At the moment, I'm doing davening.
oh, okay. There's davening.
I'm not davening, I'm watching it davening.
Yeah, he's joining davening.
De learning is zeker geschmack, little but Shlomo Zalman. Mordechai Shmuel ben Israel, Shmuel ben Yehuda Leib, Mordechai ben Yosef.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon to those of you who have joined us from Israel. We have a number of families who have dedicated our shiur this evening, all families of individuals who are regular participants in our weekly online shiurim at Mizrahi. And I'd like to thank all of you for your very generous sponsorship of this evening's shiur. This week's shiur is generously sponsored by Avi and Kathy Paluch and family, in loving memory of Avi's father, Yosef Yehuda ben Avraham alav shalom, whose yahrzeit is coming up on the 22nd of Elul. This evening's shiur is also generously sponsored by Naomi and Shmuel Alta and family, in loving memory of Shmuel's mother, Sima bat Yisrael Velea alea shalom, whose first yahrzeit is going to be on the 20th of Elul. And in addition, this week's shiur is generously sponsored by Danny Lam and Gilda Moss, in loving memory of their mother, Il Salam alea shalom, Yitl bat Shlomo Zalman alea shalom, whose second yahrzeit is tonight, the 19th of Elul. I wish you all arichut yamim, and each of these special neshamot should have an aliyah. This week's parasha, Parshat Ki Tavo, commences with the mitzvah of Bikurim. And it starts as follows. V'haya and it shall be, Ki tavo el ha'aretz asher Hashem Elokecha noten lecha nachala. When you come along to the land that Hashem your God gives to you as your portion, Virishta, you should possess it, V'yashavta ba, and dwell thereon. V'lakachta mereshit kol pri adam asher tavi me'artzecha, asher Hashem Elokecha noten. And you shall take from the first of all the fruits of the ground that you bring from your land that Hashem your God gives to you, V'samta vatene, and you shall place these first fruits inside a basket. And you shall go to the place that Hashem, your God, will choose to rest his name there. In the continuation of the passage, we're told about how you bring these fruits to the Kohen. And part of the process of bringing the Bikurim was reciting a very specific declaration. And the words of that declaration are familiar to us from Seder night. V'anita v'amarta lifnei Hashem Elokecha, and you should at that point respond and say before Hashem your God as follows: Arami oved avi. Many ways to translate this phrase. Let's say for now that an Aramean tried to destroy my father. Vayered Mitzrayim, and he went to Egypt. Vayagar sham b'mtei ma'at, and he lived there with few numbers. Vayisham legoy gadol atzum v'rav, but there he became a great, powerful, and numerous mention. And while you bring your Bikurim, you continue to talk about the passage of Jewish history from the time we went down to Egypt until that day. And then you reach the point when you say, Vayavienu el hamakom hazeh, and Hashem brought us to this place. Vayiten lanu et haaretz hazot, and he gave us this land. Eretz zavat chalav udvash, a land flowing with milk and honey. And a couple of psukim later, we are told to conclude this passage of Bikurim, having collected your fruits, brought them to Yerushalayim, given them to the Kohen, made your declaration, we are told. V'samachta b'chol hatov asher natan lecha Hashem Elokecha uleveitecha. And you must rejoice with all of the good that Hashem has given to you and to your household. Ata v'halevi v'hager asher b'kirbecha, you, the Levi, and the stranger who is in your midst. And this evening, I'd like to focus on this concluding instruction here. The instruction of V'samachta b'chol hatov. You should rejoice with all of the good. Now, I can understand while you're preparing your annual tax statement that you have to look at the year that's gone by and you have to come and bring certain things and deliver certain things, fine. But having reached that point when you bring these first fruits to Yerushalayim, you do everything you're supposed to do, how can the Torah then command us and tell us, V'samachta b'chol hatov, you must rejoice, you must be happy? How can the Torah legislate emotion in such a way? Can we just press a button and suddenly feel happy? what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to consider in order to achieve the simcha, which is mandated in this passage? And when I ask this question, I believe I'm asking a relevant question for us, because lockdown 6 has been so different from lockdowns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's something about this lockdown, or maybe a few things about this lockdown, which have had a more detrimental impact on people's spirits and their positivity and their general joy of life. But what can you do? This Motzei Shabbat, we're going to start saying Slichot. Before we know it, it's going to be Rosh Hashanah. It is a time of year to be happy and to rejoice. And we have to pick ourselves up for the Chagim. And so as we move through this shiur, and we look at the context of Bikurim, and how we can be told in the context of Bikurim that we have to be happy, at the back of my mind, or maybe slightly further forward in my mind, what I'm also asking is, for those of us this time of year who don't yet quite feel the Yom Tov spirit and don't really feel that they can get in that place quite yet, what can we do in order to reach that simcha which is required of us? Approach number 1 is a simple approach in theory. In source number 2, we read in the Midrash, V'samachta, you should rejoice, that's b'chol minei smachot, do all these different things to make yourself happy. Melamed, and it teaches us that what it means is that you have to bring a peace offering at this point in the procedure. And we learn, really, you're throwing a party, you're bringing a korban, and you're going to have lots of meat. Ne'emar kan v'samachta, and we're drawing a parallel here, because in this context we are commanded to be happy. But we're also told above, earlier on in the book of Dvarim, v'samachta b'chagecha, you should rejoice on your chagim. And as we move through this year, we're going to see the parallels between the big context of Bikurim and the context of chagim with the command to be happy. And here the Midrash learns from one context to the other. Ma simcha hamura lahalan korban shlamim. Just as in the context of a chag, we express our simcha with a korban shlamim. Af simcha hamura kan korban shlamim, here as well. The simcha requires a sacrifice, this peace offering, which will allow you to sense that joy. And what does it mean? B'chol hatov, you should celebrate with all the good. Zeh hashir. This is a reference to singing. And there are some of our commentators who, at this point, talk about the power of song to make you happy. So in other words, based on this midrash, the Torah tells you to be happy. How should you be happy? Offer up a nice korban, throw a nice feast, sing songs, behave in a happy way, rejoice. And perhaps the most famous person who requests that we behave in such a way is Rav Nachman of Breslov, and I'll quote from him in source number. Famous words, he says, mitzvah gedola liyot b'simcha tamid. It is a great mitzvah to always be happy. And he says, v'tzarich litgabeh me'od b'chol hakochot. We really have to gird ourselves with all of our strengths to distance sadness, and depressing feelings. We should only ever be exceedingly happy. And that is of medicinal value for all kinds of illnesses. Because these illnesses come as a result of sadness and this dark disposition. Rav Nachman Breslov says, do whatever you can to make yourself happy, afilu b'mila d'shtuta, even with shtus, absolute nonsense. Rav Nachman of Breslov says, mitzvah gdola liyot b'simcha tamid. I've got a cousin called Rabbi Simcha Mervis. He's a Breslover rabbi in Tzfat, and he is far more qualified than I am to really explain this concept and believe in it fully. But either way, as Rav Nachman of Breslov explains, what's expected of us here is be happy. Even if you're going to watch nonsense, entertain yourself with silly things, behave in a silly way, whatever will make you happy, just make yourself happy. David commented that it's difficult to throw a party if you can't invite anyone. And perhaps David was inferring perhaps more than he intended to infer. Perhaps he meant to infer something, which we're going to see later on in the shiur. But on a simple level, what have we seen so far? The Torah says, be happy. How can we be happy? We can be happy by being happy. Sandra, if that's what will make you happy, if dancing will work for you, Rav Nachman of Breslov will say, go for it. However, for those of us who are not Hasidim of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and who feel that you can't just press a button and feel that, and sometimes you need a bit more. You need a few tools in your toolkit in order to pick yourself up. Let's look at some different approaches. I find approach 2 to be particularly fascinating because the Rav Nachman Ber Breslov approach is mitzvah gdola liot b'simcha tamid. The word tamid here is an interesting one. It is always a big mitzvah to be b'simcha. Well, is that always the case? No, not necessarily. When you're in mourning, you're not supposed to be b'simcha. On other occasions, you're not supposed to be b'simcha. And what we see in the Mishnah in Bikurim in source number 4 is as follows. Me'atzeret va'ad hachag, from Shavuot until Sukkot, mevi v'koreh, you bring your Bikurim and you read out, you recite this passage. However, once that time of year has passed, Minachag vad Chanukah, from Sukkot until Chanukah, mevi ve'eno koreh, you can bring your Bikurim, but you don't make this, you don't read out this recital. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says actually even afterwards you can bring it. But there's an opinion here in the Mishnah that there is a specific window in the year that you're able to say these words to fully perform the mitzvah of Bikurim. Now, why would you say that it's limited to a specific window in the year? Rashi tells us in source number 5, V'samachta b'chol hatov, rejoice with all of the good. Mikan amru, from the fact that we're told to rejoice, this is where they got it from to say, Ein korin mikra bikurim ela bizman simcha me'atzeret v'adachag. You only read the passage of Bikurim when you bring your Bikurim at a time of happiness. When is it a time of happiness? Rav Nachman of Breslov would have said, whenever you want, always. But no. Rashi says, the time of happiness is specifically from Shavuot to Sukkot. There's a window in the year where you feel that happiness. Why is that a happy time of year? Because that is the time of the year in the agricultural cycle when somebody gathers in their produce and their fruit and their wine and their oil. That is the time where you reap all the fruits of your hard labor throughout the year. And that is the time that you see the great riches and wealth which have come to you as a result of your hard work throughout the year. That is the time to be truly sameach, the simcha which has come as a result of that investment over time. But once that period has passed, once Sukkot has gone, mevi ve'eno koreh, you can bring your Bikurim, but you don't read this passage anymore. What Rashi is telling us based on this Mishnah, and it appears in the Gemara and Pesachim as well, what Rashi is telling us is that the mitzvah to be happy doesn't appear without a context. It is specifically within the context of reaping the rewards of hard work that we are told to sense that happiness. It's not that whenever you want, you can just press a button at any time of the year, do a silly dance and make yourself feel happy. It is within a specific context, the context of the happiness which comes as a result of putting in the hard work over an extended period of time. And this concept has a parallel when it comes to the mitzvah of being happy on Yom Tov. We read in source number 6, this is from earlier in the book of Dvarim. Shivat yamim tachog l'Hashem Elokecha. For 7 days you should celebrate with Hashem your God. B'makom asher yivchar Hashem, and the place that Hashem has chosen, that means celebrate Sukkot in Israel. Ki yivarechecha Hashem Elokecha b'chol tvuatcha v'chol masei yadecha. For Hashem has blessed you with all of your produce and all of the work of your hands. V'hayita ach sameach, you should be exceedingly happy. Second song of the night that's appeared in our words. V'samachta b'chagecha, we're told you should be happy, rejoice on your festival. V'hayita ach sameach, not only should we be happy, we're told to be exceedingly happy. Now, how are we supposed to do that? How can the Torah say it's Yom Tov? Be happy. And the Da'at Zkein Mibali Tosfot point out something fascinating about when exactly the Torah commands us to be happy on Yom Tov. V'hayita ach sameach, you should be exceedingly happy. The Da'at Zkein Mibali Tosfot says, Ata motzeh ketiv shalosh smachot b'chag HaSukkot. Thrice, the Torah tells us to be happy in the context of Sukkot. Number one, v'samachta b'chagecha, rejoice on Chag, that's Sukkot. Number two, ach sameach, you should be exceedingly happy. Number three, v'samachta lefnei Hashem Elokecha, rejoice before Hashem your God, dichtiv b'parshat Emor HaKohanim, which appears in Parsha Emor. Thrice in the Torah, we are told to rejoice on Sukkot. L'gabei Shavuot, how often does the Torah tell us to be happy on Shavuot? Lo ktiv ela chada. Only once in the Torah are we told to be happy on Shavuot, when we're told, v'samachta lefnei Hashem Elokecha, rejoice before Hashem your God, in the context of Shavuot. L'gabei Pesach, how often does the Torah tell us to be happy on Pesach? Lo ktiv simcha klal, not at all. Now, on a halachic level, there's a mitzvah to be happy on every Yom Tov. We'll see that soon in the Rambam. So there's a mitzvah to be happy on Pesach, there's a mitzvah to be happy on Shavuot, and there's a mitzvah to be happy on Sukkot. However, never in the context of Pesach does the Torah tell us to be happy. On Shavuot, it's only once, and on Sukkot, it is thrice. Why this discrepancy? The Da'at Zkein Mibali HaTosfot explains. We have to understand these chagim and what they represent in terms of these different stations along the journey of the agricultural year. Pesach is simply too early in the agricultural year, and we haven't yet gathered in any produce from the field, any fruit of the tree. So at Pesach, what do we have to rejoice with? We haven't yet made any profit. We haven't yet reaped any rewards from our hard labors. Jump forward 7 weeks. V'chag HaShavuot, when it comes to Shavuot, kvar nilkatu hatvuot. Then we're already bringing in our produce from the field. And therefore, v'ikachada simcha v'lo yoter. So the Torah tells us once to be happy in the context of Shavuot, but no more. Ki adayin lo nilkatu perot ha'ilan, because you haven't yet brought in the fruit of the trees. And you haven't properly brought in the produce into your house. You've got a bit further in the agricultural year. There's a bit more to rejoice with, but you're not fully there. And then eventually, when you reach the end of the agricultural year and the festival of Sukkot, that at that stage you've gathered in your produce and the fruit of the tree, and you've brought it all into your house. As hasimcha hi shleima, that is when one's joy is complete. That's why thrice the Torah tells us to be happy on Sukkot. What we see here, therefore, both in the context of Bikurim and in the context of the mitzvah to be happy on Yom Tov, is that the Torah is not telling us to turn up one day and to spontaneously feel happy. That's not what true simcha really is. Perhaps that is sason, which is a different word in Hebrew. That's a sudden elation, but that's not what we're describing here. The mitzvah to be happy is a mitzvah to work hard. It's a mitzvah to put in the effort over a long period of time, and then to reach the stage where you can look back on your hard efforts with tremendous nachas and deep satisfaction and say that you are happy with that which you have achieved over a period of time. You don't just press a button and feel that sensation. It's something which comes, and even if circumstances might be difficult or challenging or things might come away, that is a deep-rooted sense of satisfaction which is much, much harder to take away. And so, I understand that some of you have only just joined us. We're asking about the question where the Torah tells us in this week's parasha to be happy on when you bring your Bikurim. And the Torah also tells us to be happy on Yom Tov. How can the Torah tell us to be happy? So far, we've seen approach number one, like Rav Nachman of Breslov: be happy, throw a party, do silly things, entertain yourself, do whatever it takes. Approach number two is that when the Torah tells us to be happy, it is specifically in the context of a deep-rooted sense of fulfillment and satisfaction, which comes after a long period of effort. My father likes to say that under a chuppah, we talk about kol sason v'kol simcha, kol chatan v'kol kala. He says the sason, that's what the chatan and the kala are, the feeling. Sason is that sudden elation, you've hit the jackpot, you're on cloud 9, that is sason. The simcha is for the parents and the grandparents. And those who have put in the effort over all the years, that is what simcha is. It's not a sudden feeling, but simcha is a sensation which you feel after an extended period of effort. Let's look at a different approach based on Rabbeinu Bachya in source number 8 that some of us saw earlier in the week on Monday morning. Arami Oved Avi. This declaration that you make when you bring Bikurim commences with these words which are well known to us from Seder night. Earlier on, I translated these words as saying that Aramean, as a reference to Lavan, tried to destroy my father Yaakov. However, Rabbeinu Bachya explains this differently. And he says, Karali Yaakov Arami. The Aramean being referred to here is Yaakov himself. Ze'odata Ibn Ezra Zal, that's what the Ibn Ezra says. Klomar ani haya b'lo mamon. And the word Oved means poor. So Arami Oved Avi means my father or my forefather was impoverished. Vayered Mitzrayim, and he went to Egypt. Klomar Oved haya kashe'arad leMitzrayim, meaning he was poor when he came down to Egypt. V'gam hayasham ger uvim tei ma'at, and he was a stranger there, and there were very few number. V'achar kach chazar sham legoy gadol, and there in Egypt we became this big, powerful nation. V'chein hayu habanim klal Yisrael, and so we as a Jewish nation go through a similar process when we recall our history. Ata Hashem hotzeitanu me'avdut kasha, you Hashem brought us out of hard labor. V'ge'altanu, and you redeemed us ba'otot of a muftim, with signs and wonders. V'natata lanu eretz zavat chalav u'dvash, and you've given us this land flowing with milk and honey. When we bring our Bikurim, we tell a tale of rags to riches. We recall our humble beginnings. We look back at our poverty. We look back at our family histories. For some of us, it really is our families, where they arrived in a country with little and they made themselves up and built themselves up. But on a national level, we look to the very beginning of our national family, as we as a family arrived in Egypt as poor people, a small group of people, and look how powerful and strong and wealthy we became. Why do we give this history lesson when bringing those first fruits in a basket along to Yerushalayim? Rabbeinu Bachya tells us the aim of this poetic narrative is שיתחייב האדם לתת אל ליבו בזמן מעלתו ושלוותו, זמן הירידה והשפלות שהיה. When a person reaches a status of achievement, of shalva, of peace and quiet, when we achieve those great places in life, we have to remember our humble beginnings and the lowly place that we have come from. We have to have that historical perspective. And so approach number 3 is as follows. The Torah tells us to be happy when you bring your Bikurim. But why is the Torah telling us to be happy? The Torah is telling us to look at the bigger picture. Look at where we've come from. Look at how far we've come. So many people have said to me on the phone during this lockdown, well, it was worse in the war. It was worse in Europe. We've got it better than them. And it's true. And that's an incredibly low bar to compare to. Hopefully we'll be able to compare to a higher bar. But the point is that historical perspective and a broader global perspective helps us acknowledge how wealthy we are, how blessed we are, how incredibly privileged we are to have what we have. And so the Torah is telling us not just to look back at the last year of hard work and this year's balance sheet in terms of produce, but just to take a step back and breathe and consider where we've come from in order to then be able to rejoice before Hashem with all the blessings that he has given us. Approach number 4 was hinted at before in David Prince's comment in the chat earlier on in the shiur. Because the Ibn Ezra says in source number 9, V'ta'am ata v'halevi v'hager. Note, the Torah doesn't tell you just to be happy when you bring your Bikurim. The Torah says be happy, you and the Levi and the Ger. There's a guest list which appears in this context. Because Ibn Ezra says, Shata chayav lesamchem b'pri admatacha. you have to bring joy to these people with the fruits of your land. The Torah isn't just telling us to be happy. The Torah is telling us to be happy before Hashem and to share that joy with vulnerable people, with people who don't necessarily own property, or those who don't necessarily feel as if they fit in, or those who can't necessarily afford to rejoice themselves. The commandment to be joyous is a commandment to share that joy with other people. And this has a parallel with Yom Tov as well. Earlier on, we saw the pasuk of V'hayita ach sameach, to be exceedingly happy. But let's look at the context in which that song appears. You know, we sing V'samachta b'chagecha, these words from pasuk Yud of source 10, be happy on your chag. And then we jump to the words V'hayita ach sameach, and be exceedingly happy. It's a lovely song. Keep singing the song. Stay happy. But it misses out all the context. It misses out all the important words. This is the context in source number 10. You should rejoice before Hashem your God. Who should rejoice? Well, Ata uvincha, uvitecha, va'avdecha, va'amatecha. You and 4 members of your household. You, your son, your daughter, your servant, your maidservant. And then, in addition to the 4 people who you are looking after, there are 4 more people. V'halevi asher b'sharecha, the Levi in your gate, v'hager, and the convert or the stranger, v'hayatam, and the orphan, v'almana, and the widow, asher b'kirbecha, is in your midst. And you should do this, b'makom asher yivcha Hashem Elokecha l'sheken shmo, in the place, Sham, the place that Hashem your God will choose to rest His name there. So we're told to rejoice, but there's a specific guest list: the members of your household and these 4 other categories. And a few psukim later in pasuk Yud, V'samachta b'chagecha, the beginning of the song, be happy on your chag. What are we missing out in that song? Again, ata uvincha uvitecha v'avdecha v'amatecha, you and these 4 people from your own household, your son, your daughter, your servant, your maidservant. And then these 4 other categories, v'alevi, v'ager, v'yatom, v'amana, she'b'sharecha, together with the Levi and the ger and the yatom and amana, who's your midst. That is who you're supposed to rejoice with. And then we're told, shivat yamim tachog l'Hashem Elokecha b'makom asher yivchar Hashem. You should rejoice in the place that Hashem will choose for 7 days. For Hashem has blessed you with all of your produce, and all the produce of your hand. You should be exceedingly happy. And that passage concludes with the words, Ish kamatnat yado, each person according to how much they can give. It's all about giving. It's about sharing. And that is how we measure our celebration. The blessing of Hashem your God that He has given to you. And so this requirement to share our joys with others as the expression of our simcha of Chag is codified when Rambam writes down this halacha in his Yad HaChazak. Rambam in source number 11 starts off by saying, Shivat Yemei HaPesach, the 7 days of Pesach, Ushmonat Yemei HaChag, and the 8 days of Sukkot. Imshar Yamim Tovim Kulam Asurim Behesped V'Ta'anit. When it comes to these special days and all other Yom Tovs, you're not allowed to have a eulogy on such a day. You cannot fast on such a day. V'chayav Adam Liot Behen Sameach V'Tov Lev. On those days, you have to be happy and have a joyous heart. Hu Uvanav V'Ishto Uvnei Beito. You, children, wife, the members of your household, V'chol Hanilvim Alav, and all those who are naturally attached to you. Shneimar, as it says in the Torah, V'samachta b'chagecha, etc. Be happy on your chag, etc. Now, on a strict halachic level, af al pi simcha hamurakan hi korban shlamim. Yes, the simcha we're talking about here is bringing a korban shlamim, but in addition, yesh bichlal ota simcha lismoach hu v'anav uvnei beito kol echad v'echad k'ra'ui lo. In addition to the formal halachic technical requirement of bringing a korban, what we're supposed to do is to make sure that you bring joy to everybody. Each one kara'uilo, whatever brings joy to different people. Rambam goes on to give examples. I didn't bring them this evening. You can look at his examples of what he thought would bring joy to each member of the family. But the bottom line is that different things bring joy to different people. And then after giving those examples, Rambam then gives these powerful words which you would have heard me say before. And when you're celebrating your Yom Tov, and when you're eating and you're drinking, Chayav lahachil, you also have to feed lager, layatom, ula'almana, the stranger, the orphan, the widow, im shar ha'aniyim ha'umlelim, together with all other impoverished individuals. Aval, however, mishanoel dlatot chatzero, if somebody locks the doors of their courtyard, v'ochel v'shoteh v'anav v'ishto, and he eats and he drinks, he, together with his wife and his family, and he doesn't share that celebration with other vulnerable individuals. Ein zo simchat mitzvah. This is not the simcha of a mitzvah, ala simchat kreisa. That's just the simcha of his stomach. The difference between the simcha of your stomach and the simcha of a mitzvah is whether you are sharing that simcha with vulnerable people as well. And so our fourth approach this evening to the Torah's commandment in the context of Bikurim and also in the context of the Chagim, to be happy, is that the Torah isn't just telling us to be happy. The Torah is telling us to be happy and to share that joy with vulnerable people as well. And there have been numerous psychological studies shown about the benefits of sharing your joy with others, that actually helping other people makes you a happier individual. And if you're feeling down during this lockdown, a great way to feel a little bit better is to phone up somebody else who might be feeling down during this lockdown, or to give to somebody else, or to help somebody else out. And by helping out other people, you yourself benefit and you yourself gain, and you achieve that feeling of self-worth. Now, it's a little bit dangerous what I'm saying at the moment, because we shouldn't use other people as pawns in our need for self-worth. And when you give to other people, the focus should be on the receiver and what they need. It's not just about what we need. You know, sometimes you can drown other people with inappropriate levels of contact and affection for your own sake. That's not a healthy thing to do. But if it's done in a healthy way with the correct intentions and you genuinely prioritize the needs of the other person, bringing simcha to the ger, the yatom, the almanah, to any vulnerable individual is actually a way to increase our own simcha. Now, in the final part of this evening's shiur, I'd like to look at a different context in which simcha appears in this week's parasha. Because it doesn't only appear at the beginning in the context of Bikurim, but it appears at the end of the horrific tochacha, which also appears in this week's parasha. And we're told why the tochacha will happen. We read the most unthinkable and unimaginable horrors which will appear to us and come to us. Why is this going to happen? The Torah tells us. All of these curses are going to come upon you. And they will pursue you, and they'll catch up with you, until you're destroyed. Why? Well, first of all, because you didn't listen to the voice of Hashem, your God, to keep his mitzvot and his statutes that he commanded you to do. So number one, because you didn't listen to the Torah. And as a result, and they will therefore be for you as a sign and as a wonder, something for people to learn from, and for your children for all time. And then the Torah goes on to say, why will this all happen to us? It's not only because we didn't listen to the mitzvot, but we're also told, Tachat asher lo avadata et Hashem Elokecha b'simcha. Because you did not serve Hashem, your God, with joy, uvetov levav merov kol, and with a good heart from everything that you have. It's a terrifying concept. Why is the tochacha going to come upon us? Absolute catastrophes. Why? Not just because we didn't keep Torah mitzvot. You can keep all 613 mitzvot and the tochacha can still happen. Because you didn't do it with joy and you didn't do it with a good heart. That's what the Torah says. Rabbeinu Bachya explains in source number 13 that what we're being told here isn't that these will happen, these things will happen because you weren't happy. No. Because you didn't serve Hashem, your God, with joy. The Torah is criticizing us here and saying that we will become guilty of serving Hashem our God. That we did do the mitzvot, but we didn't do the mitzvot with joy. We didn't do the mitzvot with enthusiasm. because we're obligated to enjoy the performance of mitzvot. And enjoying the mitzvah is an independent mitzvah, which is independent of the reward for that mitzvah. When you perform a mitzvah, there's a reward for performing that mitzvah. Separately, there's a reward for the spirit in which we perform the mitzvah, which is independent of the mitzvah itself. Balkain, therefore, these most unthinkable things will happen to us. Why? Because we served Hashem, but we didn't do so with simcha. That's why we should perform mitzvot with joy and with kavanah shlema, with absolute intent. It's a very, very difficult concept. It's such a high bar to really express that enthusiasm and that motivation and that joy when we perform all the mitzvot. But that's what it says in the Torah. And if that's what the Torah says, then it's something which we can achieve, and it's something which we have to work towards and aim towards. There's another way of explaining this punishment for lacking joy. I mean, there are many ways. I've only brought a couple tonight, but not the Rabbeinu Bachya's approach, that the punishment was for a lack of joy in the performance of mitzvot, but rather that it connects with the first part of our shiur. We see something like this in source number 14 in the Bechor Shor. Because you didn't worship Hashem. In a place where you really should have rejoiced with Hashem, with joy and with that fullness of heart. Why are you supposed to rejoice with Hashem? Because Hashem has brought you joy and He's done good things for you and He's made you great over all the others. But you didn't want to worship Him. Now you're going to know what hard work really is. What we're saying is as follows. At the beginning of this week's parasha, we are commanded to rejoice before Hashem when we achieve amazing things, when we've received blessing, when we receive wealth, when we receive just shalvat hanefesh, that place where life is tranquil, life is okay. If you know where your next 2 meals are going to come from a halachic perspective, you're not poor, and from a global perspective, you're one of the most privileged people on this planet. The beginning of our parasha tells us that when we look at our produce, we bring our first fruits to Hashem, and we have to acknowledge that blessing in the context of Hashem. However, if we fail to do so, and we fail to rejoice before Hashem, then that will lead to the horrific tochacha. And tochacha in this week's parasha has a specific purpose, as we see in source number 15. As Rabbeinu Bachya explains, others say it as well. The Torah is a tale of 2 tochachas, amongst other things. There's a tochacha in the book of Vayikra, and there's a tochacha in the book of Dvarim. We looked at these 2 tochachas as well. We did somewhat of a comparative study in our shiur on Parashat Dvarim a number of weeks ago. Either way, it is told to us that both these tochachas have already happened in Jewish history. The first tochacha took place with the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. Aval elu nitkaimu kulan b'bayit sheni. And the tochacha of this week's parasha, the second tochacha, is a description of the destruction of Bayit Sheni, the second Beit HaMikdash. And Amafarshim describe in great detail, going word by word, phrase by phrase, how each of these things took place with the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. Piecing this together, we can make the following claim. Why was the second Beit HaMikdash destroyed? What if the tochacha in this week's parasha is describing the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash? Then the answer to that question is the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. The Torah tells us why. Because we didn't rejoice before Hashem. The second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of a lack of simcha. It's a terrifying concept. It's a very big thing to claim. It's what it says in the Torah, if this is a reference to the second Beit HaMikdash. But there's a problem with this. Because we know why the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. And we know it in source number 16 from the Gemara in Yoma. And this is a well-known concept. Mikdash Rishon Mipnei Macharav. Why was the first Beit HaMikdash destroyed? Mipnei Shlosha Dvarim Shehayu Bo, because of three sins, the three big ones. Let's call them the three cardinal ones. Every mitzvah is a big mitzvah. Avodah Zarah v'Gilui Arayot v'Shvichut Damim, idolatry, adultery, murder. That's why the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed. And as we know of our Mikdash Sheni, when it comes to the second Beit HaMikdash, Shayu Oskin b'Torah v'Mitzvot v'Milut Chasadim. In the second Beit HaMikdash, we learned Torah, and we performed mitzvot, and we were involved in Gemilut Chasadim. We did all these wonderful things. So why was the second Beit HaMikdash destroyed? It rolls off the tongue. The second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam, because of causeless hatred. But now we've got a question. We say that the second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of Sinat Chinam. We all know that concept. But the Torah tells us that the second Tochacha will happen because of a lack of Simcha. So which is it? Is it a lack of Simcha, or is it Sinat Chinam? And how can this well-known concept of Sinat Chinam just ignore what the Torah says? Assuming the Tochacha in this week's parasha is talking about the second Beit HaMikdash, how can it just ignore what the Torah tells us explicitly? It's going to happen because of Sinat Chinam. Mute. This question is posed by Rav Frand, and I really love his answer. And those of you who come each week may have picked up by now that I really like Rav Frand. Rav Yisachar Frand is incredible. If you're looking for a good Dvar Torah to tell around your Shabbat table, or in shul from the pulpit, Rabbi Yisachar Frand online has such a high hit rate of brilliant ideas that you can share, which are just really fantastic. I'm a big fan of his. And let's look at his response to the question we just asked. And he says, perhaps there is no contradiction. The Torah is referring to the underlying cause of the Churban Bayit Sheni. The underlying cause of the Churban Bayit Sheni was the lack of simcha, joy. Failure to serve Hashem with joy, in turn, leads to sinat chinam. When a person is happy with himself, the feeling is contagious. He is willing to share that peace and that happiness. Those feelings affect other people. Chazal are telling us that because you were not happy with your lot, and you are not besimcha, therefore the consequence is baseless hatred. When a person is not happy with himself, he cannot tolerate others having any kind of happiness either. If you have sinat chinam, you don't want to share with those people. I think Sandra was saying something similar, but from a different angle. Thus, Rabbi Frand concludes, there is no contradiction. The second temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam. But sinat chinam results from people who are not happy with themselves and not besimcha, and are not doing mitzvot besimcha. When somebody behaves in an abrasive way, in a corrosive way, in a negative way towards others, it's a sign that that is an unhappy person. And in addition to looking at their behavior and the sinat chinam, which is expressed as a result of that behavior, what we also have to acknowledge is that there's something in that person's life which is making them upset. They're not necessarily mad and they're not necessarily bad. They might just be sad. And we have to ask what's making them upset. But that lack of happiness is what leads to sinat chinam. These aren't two different views, says Rabbi Frand, but they are expressions of the same thing. Our parasha doesn't only have curses, it also has blessings. And I'd like to conclude with a blessing from the parasha. Because one of the blessings is, Untancha Hashem l'rosh v'lo l'zanav. Hashem will make you the head and not the tail. You're only going to be on top and you're not going to be below. When you keep the mitzvot of Hashem your God that I command you to do and to perform today, to keep and to perform. Now this is a beautiful bracha. You're going to be on top and never at the bottom. You'll be the head and you'll never be the tail. But we can ask, why do we need the positive and the negative in this bracha? If we're going to be the rosh, if we're going to be on top, if we're going to be the head, the leader, then obviously v'lo l'zanav, we're not going to be the tail. And if we're going to be rak lamala, only on top, then obviously v'lo tiyeh lamata, we're not going to be below. Why are we blessed to be both on top and not below? Is that not tautologous? You can ask a similar question about what we're all going to say on Rosh Hashanah in the Simanim, if we're going to take a head of a fish or head of a lamb or whatever it is. We finish off that one of the Simanim by saying, we should be a head and not a tail. The same question. Just say Sheni El Rosh will be the head. Why are we told to be at the head and not the tail? Rabbi Abraham Twersky explained as follows. He says it is possible that somebody could be LaRosh. Somebody could be on top. Somebody could be Rak Lamala. They could be achieving in every area of their life, professionally, academically, with wealth, socially. They could be on top in every way. But at the same time, the person can be Lamata. The same person can be very down, can be below, can be at the bottom of the world at the same time. And you may not even notice it, that somebody can be LaRosh and LeZanav, or Lamata and Lamata at the very same time. What this parasha is telling us to do is when we are LaRosh, when we have achieved all these things, to look at them in the correct perspective, to look at them in the historical perspective, to understand the hard effort that goes into achieving anything which is worthwhile in life, and thereby we'll be able to achieve that true simcha. The bracha is that this year we're going to be LaRosh v'lo LeZanav. We're going to achieve things, we're going to be successful, and at the same time we're going to achieve that great joy that we will always be on top and never be below. I wish you all a beautiful, tranquil, peaceful and enjoyable Shabbat ahead. This week's shiur was generously sponsored by Avi and Kathy Paluch and family, in loving memory of Avi's father, Yosef Yehuda ben Avram alav shalom, whose yortzeit is on the 22nd of Elul, and by Naomi and Shmuel Alter and family, in loving memory of Shmuel's mother, Sima bat Yisrael v'Leah aleh shalom, whose first yortzeit is the 20th of Elul, and by Danny Lam and Gilda Moss, in loving memory of their mother, Ilsa Lam aleh shalom, Yittel bat Shlomo Zalman aleh shalom, whose second yortzeit is tonight, the 19th of Elul. Shabbat shalom to you all.
Shikoyach.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Ashkoach, Danny.
Shabbat shalom, shkoyach.
Did you have to sleep for me?
No, I heard every word.
I didn't.
Thank you.